Today started with the workshops, as many of you know, because you were in those workshops. I think most of you were. And I spent most of the morning in between all of them, and I got to tell you that there was a lot of work that took place this morning, a tremendous amount of work. And Google Forms also was used quite extensively, and we'll compile all that at the end of the conference, but we want to thank you for that. The three workshops were essentially intense at times, and I think if the speakers in a moment had a chance to talk in more detail, you'd hear more about that. But I want you to know that the contributions that they made are making right now in a few minutes will have a residual effect and impact on how we go forward with some of the areas that we've addressed this week. So I'm going to go ahead and turn right now to this session. We're going to have all three chairs of the three work groups come up and give literally a 10-minute overview of their sessions. So I'd like to start with Mr. Ed Sobisk. If he would, Dr. Ed Sobisk, please. He's the Chief Education Professor of the Computer and Cyber Science at the Cyber Institute, and Ed ran a super panel, or workshop.
Can I get the first slide, please? Great. Thank you. Just want to thank AFCEA for the opportunity to have this workshop, and especially the 50 to 60 people who showed up for Workshop 1, along with the four co-chairs. I will now attempt to condense the brain power of 50 to 60 people spending 3 hours together into 10 minutes. So we are going to just briefly get straight into the education and training questions that we looked at. And I really want to point out to you that don't read the answers only. I think that at least 50% of the value on this slide is the question. So in this group, we actually went through 2 iterations with Kevin Hostra, and this question about the need for learning objectives, addressing multi-domain battle, and training, especially for an environment in which conflict is blurred, and which even it might be difficult to identify whether something was cyber conflict or was it just, bad equipment or incompetence. And so based on those challenges, the first was to go ahead and look for multiple layers of cyber-focused exercises or experiments, including everything from just trying out the actual IT tools to the CMF augmentation and the CMF getting involved, to things like the program of record systems and things like that. Making sure that we incorporate Intel-based operations left of zero to when a phase zero, or worst case, phase 1 starts to occur, that we're not caught off guard, that we're not ready, and that we haven't thought through the cyber components. Making sure that we continue to intelligently integrate cyber into campaign planning, including considering whether or not the effects should be done by cyber or by kinetic. Is there a priority? And then making sure we account for the authorities and the timing to make sure that works out. And then finally, this dial of death, I think, is an Air Force term. But right now, there was thoughts by the groups that cyber's integration is too artificial. If a flashing light comes on letting you know that you're under cyber attack, that's probably not realistic. China or Russia or Iran or North Korea has not agreed to that yet. So until they do, part of cyber needs to be dealing with the nuance of deciding whether or not you're under attack. Perhaps realizing you're under attack might be the hardest part. And going through the processes and the training to make sure that you are trying to decide based on the logs or what's happening whether or not you need to go to your plan B, or whether it is more of a system issue and you need to work your way back and restore plan A. Next slide, please. Second question here is, we need to agree on some foundational knowledge, skills, and abilities that we want of our minimal knowledge, skills, and abilities that we want of our commissioned and non-commissioned leaders for the cyber force. And while there might not be necessarily great surprises here, a lot of them are what you would expect, the continued need for consensus on which of these knowledge, skills, and abilities we need. And then also notice in there a couple of things: governance and proper psychological attributes. So, and We have more details on all of these that we will pass on, but continuing to come together as a profession, as a community on what are the foundations that we need to be covering, and then, of course, identifying ways that we can bring people who are not yet at that level up to speed. Next question, please. So the third and fourth question actually was identical, and it was two different groups that looked at it from a couple of different angles. And it was the need to create cyber professionals that can remain relevant and able in a domain that's continually evolving with evolving and an intelligent adversary. And so the first group, the three takeaways, were part of having somebody who continues to learn throughout their life is that they should continue to always be assessing where they're at throughout their life. And part of that should be getting good at self-assessment, peer assessment, other forms of identifying where you're at in development and where you need to go. Also then, how do we resource these developmental opportunities? If we want to develop a culture where people know they need to be lifelong learners, how do we set that up to be something that is reinforced by the system? And then finally, how do we ensure that our cyber personnel are rewarded for their development? If mediocrity gets the same reward as excellence, maybe we're not sending the message we want to send. And then the last slide, same question, is kind of a different look at it. And this one looked at from an instructor point of view, and I think this is something that General Morrison just talked about a few moments ago, so good news, we're right on track, is that the need to not necessarily have it be where an instructor does 3 years on the force and then 3 years as an instructor and is completely separated. I think this back and forth between the force and instruction so that it's almost like the spiral methodology of design is the way to go, and that's exactly what the group said, and it was great to hear that that's being done, sir, and you're completely right. When I was at the armor courses, we did not have a chance to have our instructors go out and do armor missions and then jump back and give us instruction right away. Bridging the gap between soldiers with no STEM background and those that are highly trained. We want a diverse mission force, but it can be difficult to train, so both finding ways to let those who are high achieving already in STEM continue to grow and excel, and those who will, in the long run, be very valuable to the force, but maybe need some initial compensation to get up to speed on maybe the technical aspects that they didn't have as an undergraduate or something like that. And then finally, continuing to consider some unique ways to draw for surges from the private sector or academia, maybe anything from a month to a 6-month surge. Of course, wanting to support continuing to grow the Cyber Center of Excellence into the best possible, world-class center that it already is, but to take it even to the next level, sir. So, I didn't call out so if Lieutenant Colonel Sangster, thank you. If you could go back one slide, please. Dr. Scott Smith of the Army Cyber School, and back one more. I just want to, and Mark Baggett of SANS. So those are the other three co-chairs. So other than that, thank you again for this opportunity, and especially thank you to the very dedicated 50 to 60 of you who showed up and really participated and really went at it. It was great discussions.
If you didn't pick up on that, this is graduate level stuff. And if you can imagine 3 diverse work groups, or 4 in this case, coming together with a presentation here in less than an hour, it's pretty amazing. So for you, Ed, great planning and execution effort along the entire planning process. Our next up is Group 2, and that I'm going to welcome John Gallagher to the stage to talk about his team. John?
Okay, thank you. You can look around the room and easily identify those that were assigned to Work Group 2. Those are the most intelligent and the most engaged among us. So, I would say that the co-chairs remarked that they have been in a lot of different forums, but found this group to be particularly engaged. And do I control the charts? Maybe not. Next chart. Okay, we had 3 subgroups. Those are listed here, and also they were led by So the degrees by Tom Longstaff, certifications by James Stanger, and then we came up with a group that we said, degrees and certifications are not the only thing that we need to emphasize, so we actually called the group Beyond Degrees and Certifications. And what you'll see is that actually the results sort of began to coalesce, and so this beyond degrees and certification became, if I would to give a sub-conclusion to the group, that's what it was. Next chart. We'll go through these. These were the charters for the subgroups. I will not emphasize them except to make a couple of points. With regard to degrees, I think it was fairly quickly realized that the answers to some of these questions is no. And in particular, there was an observation that degrees are not doing the job of providing the skills and knowledge necessary for people to immediately go into jobs. And so anecdotally, one organization was saying 6 to 18 months to be able to get somebody who has a degree in cybersecurity and get them to the point that they feel they're able to perform. That was recognized as a weakness, and you'll see in the recommendations that the recommendations then address that. Next chart. Certifications, and you can see the list of topics that the group addressed. Next chart. Again, beyond degrees and certifications. This was really sort of the lifelong learning, the workforce evolution focus. Okay, next chart. Next chart summarizes a set of overall observations, and you'll see these themes then working through the charts that summarize each of the subgroups. So first, the current degree and certification programs are not fully meeting our requirements. That's probably not a huge surprise, but that was pretty much a consensus. There was no debate about that. Now, the emphasis, I guess, is fully. Those programs are meeting needs, but there's, in the view of those who are participating in the work group, there's a lot of things we can do. Yet, and as you'll see when we go through the charts, the view is that degrees and certifications are very important. In fact, in the course of the discussion, at one point somebody says, well, why do we need degrees at all then, if they're not meeting our needs and we're struggling to understand what programs people should go to, et cetera. But I think the end of the workshop was, wait a minute, degrees and certifications are very important. They sort of form the foundation. And so the third observation was they're a starting point. But as you'll see in the recommendations, there was very strong consensus coming out of each of the subgroups that we need to put a lot more emphasis on sort of this continuous learning and the ability to, once you have a degree, once you have certain certifications, to continue to evolve the knowledge that you need to be able to perform your job within a particular organization. Next chart. The next three charts go through each of the subgroups and provide a summary. We've got each chart has a major observation and then recommendations. So with regard to degrees, the observation I think that was most telling was, to date, a lot of the computer security, cybersecurity, even computer engineering, computer science programs have been taught sort of using the same the model as universities use for other disciplines. And I think the recognition is that this discipline is very different, and some of the recommendations address that. And so having a course content that is fairly static and that is taught by people who sort of bring institutional knowledge, maybe charitably the view was you have these gray-beard professors who have been teaching the course for a lot of years. The view was that's not always good for what we need. So, recommendations. First, all degree programs must have a strong hands-on component where that hands-on component is rooted in the actual work environment. It could be a variety of work environments, but it's not a toy simulation. It's actual real type stuff. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be going into a government or an industry organization, but you want something that is a very close approximation to the real world. Second, degree programs have to get out of the box. And again, the view is that the cybersecurity is not something that is contained to just a set of technical skills and knowledge. There is a set of affiliated areas of learning that need to be incorporated. Things like project management, human behavior, understanding, what is the motivation behind hackers? What are the organizational constructs that they operate from becomes extraordinarily important. And then, in addition, because the cyber environment is very closely wedded to understanding what is the operating environment in which you're dealing, there is a thought that we need to very closely match those who are getting a degree to an understanding of what are the operating environments. So the hands-on experience obviously provides that, but if in fact you're going to work in the DoD environment, then there's probably a need during the degree program to be able to have, whether it's a co-op program, or a internship, et cetera, where you can then learn that environment, medical, finance, same type of thing. And then third, embrace that cyber is a team sport. Many academic areas are, you can train somebody and that person can go off into a particular environment and perform very well as an individual. That's rarely the case in cyber. It's really a team operates building on the knowledge and skills as a team, and that needs to be emphasized in the degree programs. And so team teaching, lectures from those in current jobs, a best practice that was identified as one of the universities is taking graduates who have been out into the working world for several years and bringing them back as a matter of course to help teach parts of the class, and they provide real-world practical experience. Next chart. Second group, we looked at certifications. The view was certifications are really valuable, even though we're not quite maybe getting everything we can. The concept of certifications is valuable, and you'll see in the recommendations there's some suggestions on how to improve. It is the most authoritative way to teach essential skills that are needed for a job, and to then have confidence that in fact you've gotten some assessment, certification of the learning. And they often are the hands-on practical ways to learning. Now, the recommendations are certifications should not be just book knowledge, but should reflect the practical application of the knowledge. And so, hands-on as a part of the demonstration of your mastery of skills, and the certification becomes, in the view of this group, very important. Second, there's a view that we, and you'll see this becomes an overlap with all of the three subgroups, to really have practical experience. And so things like internships, laboratories, on-the-job training, again, echoed in the degree recommendations as well, become extraordinarily important, even for certifications. So you don't want to certify somebody that has just taken a program and maybe gone into a simulation and demonstrated skills. You'd also like, as a part of the certification, to say, wait a minute, what have you done in your job environment or your other developmental experiences to show that you really have on-the-job type experiences? There was a lot of discussion. We weren't able to finalize it, but questions about, well, wait a minute, shouldn't we begin to look at cyber in a similar concept that we do with various trades, plumbing, electrician, et cetera, where there is a certification that in fact gives you confidence that this individual has a certain set of skills. And the view was, yeah, that sort of feels about right. We're not there today. And the domain is a bit more complex than electrician and plumbing. The CPA environment was maybe viewed as something that was maybe a little more analogous, where you get a fundamental degree or you get a certificate of public accounting. But then there's a continual learning, and then you find certain CPAs are good in certain disciplines, et cetera. And the thought was perhaps over time, the mapping of the NICE framework to job skill requirements to then certification programs would allow you to begin to head in the direction of having something that would be more like a trade certification in the area of cyber. All right, final chart. And this was on, again, beyond degrees and certifications. And so the major observation was it's been proven through a number of studies that humans learn most not through formal training like degrees and certifications, but through on-the-job experiences and collaboration. We need to recognize that, and we need to enhance the ability of our workforce to be able to maximize their opportunity to learn in those environments. And that's really was the focus of the third group, and they came up with recommendations in 4 different areas, the first being organizations. And the group felt that it was important to be able to have within an organization a very clear articulation for the workforce is how does cyber or information, how does it fit within the mission of the organization? What are the critical elements with regard to cyber? Why is it that it's important that we protect? And that helps guide those within the organizations as they try to map out their careers, as you look at education and training and why it's important to educate and train people in cyber skills, et cetera. Second was in people. The view was we ought to look at sort of blended learning, and again, really team learning concepts, where you have active mentoring and coaching as an integral part of trying to develop the workforce, rather than you get certified, you're assumed to understand everything you need to know. Now, fortunately, within the military, this is part of the military culture and heritage, and so that's probably something that fits well. Process. The view was that it's going to be important to ensure that those that we put into key cyber jobs have enough responsibility and authority to challenge them, to keep them interested, and also that they learn skills. And so the view was that's something that becomes important as we construct the operational frameworks. Last is on technology, and it was really focused on ensuring that there is transparency and visibility of the skills of the people so that you can put them in the right place, manage the career, and that the individuals can then evolve their careers because everybody sort of understands their skills. So with that, I'll conclude. I guess we don't have time for questions. We'll go to group 3.
I got to first say I cheated John when he came up here. I didn't tell you who he was. He's the executive chairman at the Center of Internet Security. He's also been a stellar member of the AFCEA Cyber Committee for many years. John, that was a tremendous presentation, and again, we're cheating all of you here because all of you contributed in some way, I think, to the presentations that you first heard. We're going to go ahead and move quickly to the third session. Was Workshop 3, Research and Development Supporting the Cyber Training Environment, and that was chaired by Bob Casimir. Bob is the Deputy Commanding General at the Army Cyber Center of Excellence, and he is over to you for his findings, and I'll be back for some final remarks.
Well, good afternoon. Had the privilege of being the chair for work group number 3, and had some outstanding members as co-chairs, who I'll mention in a moment here. But our challenge was to kind of tease out some key elements out of research and development that's supporting the cyber training environment. Now, this is no new subject to those of us in the DoD, but what we wanted to do was expand the conversation to all the members of our panel, and they included the work group, that is. That included academia, industry, government as well as DoD. So everything we're saying here really applies across the board, but we have in our mind all the work that's going on toward a joint persistent cyber training environment. So the motivating question that posed to the work group was, how do we keep cyber warriors, be they joint, military, or elsewise, razor sharp as they prepare to engage in a very agile and changing environment? And the way that you do that, if you're in the military and certainly in the Army, is, well, you train. And you train realistically and persistently. And so you need training ranges, and we have those. But beyond that, what we needed is a whole environment for training. So with that as a kind of a backdrop, we broke into these three groups. Can I have the next slide, please? So the first group was centered on practices in metrics, really, observational and automated measures. And for that work group, we had Norbu Buchler from ARL, whose passion is really about measuring human performance and doing that in the cyber domain. So having led that work group, you can see the graphic that he came up with. I guess he figured we kind of respond well to pictures, so he put it in graphic form, which I really appreciate. And it basically says, as you can see in amber there, that today, across the spectrum from individual up through force level, we're doing manual observations and recording of data. When you get over toward qualification, it's qualification of individuals at present. And then when you go further and say, we want automated measures across the board, well, we're red. So there's a need statement there. We certainly benefited from and talked about the Gunnery Model that's being employed at the CPB. And that whole concept, while relatively well understood within the Army, certainly, and also within the Navy, beyond that may be somewhat new. So we introduced that to the panel members. But beyond that, one of the key insights from this was that the need for longitudinal studies to look over time at performance, to see if we're trending in the right direction. So getting after that kind of data is something that we're going to put into, or would propose that would be a requirement and a challenge for the future. Next slide, please. So our second subgroup dealt with scenario development and ontology supporting those scenarios. And that was led by Ken Williams from APU. So this really is about getting the dimensions correct. Everything from what authorities do we have that team members would employ, through understanding and gamifying the environment so that we can get automated measures from performance, and then on to understanding the full range of attack vectors that should be part of the scenario. Now this is just the wave tops of a very developed conversation, and as is the case with all these subgroups, all the notes that were kept are being put out there to Google Forms so that team members and others can leverage it in the future. The next slide, please. Our last work group focused on readiness of cyber teams and the dynamics of mission preparation. And for that, we were fortunate to have Colonel Paul Stanton, who's the current commander of the Cyber Protection Brigade here at Fort Gordon. So as you can clearly see, what's a requirement, and these really were kind of statements at the end of the needs for this environment, and that is that they be adaptable, dynamic, and scalable so that we can deal from individual up through team and beyond in our environments. One of the major takeaways was that we have a significant gap when it comes to battle staff preparation, to really getting down to how do you, at echelons above platoon, squad, and company, integrate the effects of cyber and deal in this dynamic environment. And lastly, the large data challenge is something that we need to address significantly within this environment. It is one of the key things that, of course, describes the whole cyber environment, leveraging that data to not only prepare ourselves better for the future, but to record it and do detailed analysis on the kind of tools that we will require in the future. So those were the three subgroups. As I said, there was quite an active dialogue and conversation. This is but the wave tops, and much of that data will be available. And we challenge you all to take a look at Google Forms and AFCEA search so that you can leverage some of that information. Thank you.